In front of the Medford Airport is a pair of whimsical model airplanes, symbolic of the early days when flying helped put Medford on the transportation map. One is a biplane, reminiscent of the mail planes that flew in and out of the valley and formed the basis for what became United Airlines. The other is a more primitive aeroplane, similar to the aircraft that made its first flight in Medford in 1910, then an encore performance a year later in 1911. And the man who brought the air age to Southern Oregon was an Iowa native by way of Portland, Eugene Burton Ely. As a self-taught rookie pilot, Ely went on an exhibition tour with a four-cylinder Curtiss Busher airplane. He first made an attempt at Sutherland, had trouble getting off the ground, so he packed up the plane and came to Medford to try again.
He was just traveling an exhibition circuit. Wherever you could find somebody who had never seen an airplane before, they would pay money to see it.
But Ely's first try in Medford wasn't much better than the one in Sutherland. He flew a little ways, but most who came to see were certainly underwhelmed, even if it was the first time that they had seen an aeroplane.
I think he was inexperienced, first of all. The engine was only 35 horsepower. He was still learning the game. And any kind of wind, and not just for Gene Ely, but any kind of wind in those planes early on, especially in 1910, could cause a lot of problems for him.
But his biggest success came later in November when he flew a Curtiss Model D biplane from a platform built on the deck of the cruiser Birmingham at Hampton Roads, Virginia. Then, just 2 months later, he bettered that in San Francisco when he landed on a similar platform built on the USS Pennsylvania, ate lunch, then took off and landed on shore again. Notice in this picture that he ditched the regulation Navy life vest for several bicycle inner tubes wrapped around his body, just in case he had to ditch in San Francisco Bay. And he also wore a leather football helmet for protection. That was in January 1911. And by this time, Ely had made quite a name for himself and was one of a select number of aeronauts, as they called themselves, wowing small-town crowds all across the country by flying their sputtering birds of linen, wood, and bamboo across the sky.
If you go to the Historical Society, they'll show you a picture of him standing by the plane. And he's got a lot of weight on him. And then if you look later on, it's a completely different guy. He's almost a scarecrow. And he said that the flying was taking it out of him. Well, most of their year and a half together, he and his wife, were spent on trains, going to a city, getting on an airplane, making flights, getting on a train.
And that's how he traveled from city to city, not by airplane.
What they would do is, after an exhibition was over, the mechanics would disassemble, pack him away in crates, put it on a railroad car that was destined for the next exhibition. When those crates got to the next exhibition, the mechanics were there, and they put it all back together. He flew the plane, same thing, over and over again. So they had to take it apart, put it together.
Finally, in June of 1911, Ely came back to Medford. By now he was called the Birdman for his world-famous exploits, flying on and off a ship. At first, he was supposed to land at a ballpark where McLaughlin Middle School is now.
Now, he was going to fly there, but the mechanics got there, and he got there, and he looked around and he said, I can't fly from this place. There's not enough room. You'll have to take all this out. So they moved him down to South Medford, which at the time, at the end of Oakdale Avenue, the Oakdale neighborhood at that time, was an open field. And so that he tried to fly there both times.
The crowd was apparently pleased, and Ely successfully winged his way over Medford. But the wear and tear of the schedule he was keeping was starting to take a toll. He promised his wife that when 1911 was over, he would quit flying.
And from what he would say, most of the aviators at the time just assumed that this was so dangerous that they probably would die. Now, of course, people say that. They don't believe it's ever going to happen. He was worried.
And then it happened. After removing the front ailerons from his plane to get more speed, Ely plowed into the ground while performing a spiral stunt at the Georgia State Fairgrounds. That was October 19, 1911, just a few months after his Medford performance and a day before his 25th birthday. He died of his injuries shortly afterward. Although Eugene Ely's flying career was relatively short, barely 2 years, he made a mark on aviation history that also has a chapter written right here in Southern Oregon. In Medford, Ron Brown, Newswatch 12.